Let's try to begin with some motivation and calm our mind. A quick sip of water here. Place your attention on the breathing. Easily found object. And when the mind is somewhat relaxed, bring it inward, your attention inward, giving up your attention to the breathing. Watch the nature of the mind behind the thoughts. Between the thoughts, if you want. Clear light nature. Let go of the sense of your body even, besides the thoughts. Even the appearance of an ego. And with wisdom, recognizing what's happening, try to apprehend the continuous nature of the mind, its clear light nature. Whatever thoughts arise, always arise within that clarity. and they disappear back into it also. Whatever appearances or thoughts arise in your mind, try to see them within a further spaciousness that encompasses them. And in so doing, let go of your attention to the objective thoughts. Perceive instead the mind, nature of the mind within which they're arising. Let go again and again of thoughts, even of your appearance of the mind, and try to see it a more subtle, factually concordant appearance of the nature of the mind. And think, although I have the wisdom to recognize this Buddha potential now, I have a perfect rebirth of leisure and endowment. It's quickly decaying. Every moment I'm getting closer to death. And all living beings are in exactly the same situation, although they have the potential to solve their problems, to be happy, to be free of suffering. Grasping to a self of their own identity, self of persons of their own. Grasping to the self of phenomena. They create negative karma, and they create another demon, the self-cherishing attitude that plagues even the Hinayana Arhats, prevents them from overcoming the subtle selfishness, prevents their mind from pervading all space, all beings. At this time, I've met the precious Mahayana teachings. There are precious gurus appearing in the world. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Churinoff Rinpoche, Kirti Sanchab Rinpoche that are guiding us. Now we have the opportunity of overcoming the obstacles to our own happiness and the obstacles to our ability to bring happiness to others. But still plagued by ego grasping and self-cherishing. We're discontent, we don't have energy to practice, even to listen, to study. I think for this next period of time, I'm going to offer up my energy to overcome my opinionated views, my self-cherishing, self-grasping, to really work toward my own happiness, as the Buddha explained, and to work to achieve the ability to bring happiness to all living beings. I'm going to participate in the study of the great text on the training of the mind, the wheel of sharp weapons, as many great beings have done before, as Atisha himself did. To see that the real enemy is not outside, but inside, for the welfare of all sentient beings. I'm going to participate in the class in order to eventually achieve enlightenment for their welfare. And then bring your attention back to the present. I wondered who was going to sit there with the Bellin Vajra. I thought maybe that was Don's seat. Tonight he was going to manifest being Vajra, Yamantaka or something. Last time I asked if we would finish some of the questions today. There was one question left from the exam. If you would write about a couple of stanzas that you'd actually found useful in your everyday life. So I'm going to ask Dan if he can relate two of them that he found useful. Wow, look at how organized. I'm impressed. Don't tell me you have a dog.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I have many notebooks.
I was just worried the dog ate them. Something.
I know someone that did happen.
What?
I know someone that really did happen.
Really did eat their homework. I'm sure it must have happened sometime, but that's the classic. That's the classic thing in school, isn't it? Oh, the dog ate my homework.
I remember now that I couldn't relate it to a specific passage, but I knew some things where the concepts helped me out.
Okay, well, that's close, I suppose. What? Which?
Well, one of the things I wrote is I was sweating the test because I hadn't studied it. It was like the wheel of shock was coming back at me for non-diligence.
Okay. I guess you could say that, yeah. Mm-hmm. Did that help? To energize you to study, or not? Or did you just notice that?
I'm struggling to increase my study time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Who actually found some? I think, yeah. Okay, good. You got a good one, okay.
Number 46.
Mm-hmm.
In short, when calamities befall me, it is the weapon of my own evil deeds turned upon me, like a spirit killed by his own soul. And what came to mind for me is an event in my life where I was riding my bicycle and I hit a deer. And the deer got away, didn't hurt him, but I broke my elbow and separated my shoulder. So, and he walked away.
You mean you were running, or you were driving it?
No, bicycle.
Oh, bicycle.
He was up on campus, coming down, and a deer jumped out, and I tried to go around, and I thought I had, and I'm on must have hooked a rear leg hook under the front wheel and just pulled it back right up.
Mm-hmm. And he was okay.
Well, he wasn't standing around when I came to.
Uh-huh. Ah, knocked you out.
Oh yeah, I broke my shoulder and I broke my elbow and separated my shoulder.
Okay.
And I know it's because of all those hundreds of little animals that I've run over in my car
Mm-hmm.
without even knowing. So I drive very slowly.
Hmm.
So that's what came to me.
So how did that relate to that? How do you explain that?
It seems to me when calamities befall me,
Mhm.
like breaking an elbow, separating the shoulder,
Mhm.
it's the weapon of my own evil deeds, which means being unmindful of the fact that when I drive or when I walk, I step on small animals.
Mhm. Like a smith killed by their own sword, by his own sword. Do you see that particular, some significance there?
The significance there is the smith is me driving this vehicle. The sword might be my automobile or my bicycle.
Okay, maybe something like that. Sounds possible. Don, did you have one? Yeah.
Number 37, when I agree a person leaves my well, it is the weapon of my own defeat to honor with not getting charity and losing options which would yield. From now on, I will vigorously make offerings and give charity. I've experienced this economy of losses recently.
Uh-huh.
So,
Because of the economy, you've experienced a lot of losses because it's a bad economy.
I see this little shortcomings in the back of me for maybe not being generous in my past lives.
Uh-huh.
I try to use it as practice by being generous, praying for the people that are my foes right now. Seeing that's my teachers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Venerable, did you have one that particularly resonated with you? Oh my gracious, okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. So you didn't do anything? Mm. I think you should certainly be familiar with them. Say for instance, if there was a question like, explain this verse, and then it would give you the verse. I don't think you have to, you'd have to, if it said, what is verse 63? I don't think there's be a question like that, But you should be familiar. This is one of the great texts that we've gone over in detail, so certainly it'd be worthwhile reading it a couple of times, maybe. How long would it take you to read it? Hour or something? Yeah? Maybe read it a couple of times and see if, as you're reading it, you can see examples in your everyday life. When people criticize me, I see often it's a wheel of sharp weapons for myself, criticizing others in the past, criticizing my teachers, or not being satisfied, or whatever. And that in having that way to think, it takes your mind away from the wrong view. What we're doing usually is we're under the influence of self-grasping and self-cherishing thought. We're perceiving something outside, something else that's the fault. There's something lacking outside. There's not enough of this or not enough of that. Should be this way, should be that way. But what we're experiencing, the discontent we're experiencing, is the result of our past karma, for sure. There's no way we can experience discontent unless we created the karma for it in the past. And to look at the particular kinds of things, if we're, if we're experiencing different kinds of, as the text said, when we feel like we can't understand, it's the wheel of sharp weapons from not having persevered in past lives. Geshe Nawandarga used to say many times, when your mind feels like it's got as though your head has a jug over it, everything's dark, you can't understand anything. That's because in the past, we didn't leave imprints in our mind that now when we hear these particular holy words, these advices, we didn't leave imprints that they would sort of spark some recognition in us. It's said that there was a pigeon. I think I've told you this story before. You've probably heard a pigeon in the cave when Vasubandhu was reciting the Abhidharma texts. And when that pigeon died and was reborn, he was reborn as a human. And he didn't understand the texts that were being recited, but he became the best of Vasubandhu's students in Abhidharma from the imprints of just hearing those texts. So here now, those of us who are listening to these subjects and thinking about it maybe a little bit more than the pigeon, you think? No, come on, a lot more, come on. Maybe when we hear these teachings again this life, because sometimes by the force of practicing Dharma, because of the object being very heavy and because of our faith and our perseverance and everything, maybe that karma can even leave imprints in our mind later this life to, again, as we hear these teachings, that they will start to resonate, certainly in future lives. So we shouldn't be discouraged and have, kind of discouraged mind like that. Anyone else have, how about you, Karen? Did you have any?
There was one on, I didn't write down the exact verse, I just looked back I read the questions and I looked back and looked for some verses that seemed to make sense.
I see.
This one was about enslavement and due to mistreating people and animals, and it said something about domineering bosses.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying I wish I'd done that when I was working, because it seemed like I was always bucking against the boss, and we were always in headers, and it made us both uncomfortable, and it was just interesting that at that time I didn't look at it as karma, I looked at it as blaming the other.
Uh-huh. Right.
And another verse was the one about illness, being caused by mistreating of others, and in the past I think I've often fought against illness, and now sometimes when I'm ill or have a headache or just not feeling well, I try using Tonglen and bringing it closer, and it feels very different, but very often it kind of passes in a very nice way, when instead of fighting against the illness, I bring it toward me.
Right.
and offer it to others.
Right. This is even a step beyond just simply accepting it, accepting its presence as, one level of mind training. Right.
People suffering.
One level the usual level is that when we have something like a headache or a pain in our body or something, we want to be free of it immediately. We feel we're upset, we're tense, we want to be free of that, and it makes the whole situation worse. Sometimes simply accepting that as the nature of things, even without an understanding of karma, but that takes a certain kind of faithful mind, an imprint from previous lives, that can make the mind relaxed. But if we have to try to inculcate that this lifetime, to understand this is the result of my past karma. This is, in a sense, this is good. This karma is being exhausted. And to have a happy mind about that, that's a way of practicing transforming that adverse condition, but in a way that makes it even more powerful, just as you were saying, to gladly, to see it as something very special, that by my experiencing this now, may others be free of this suffering in the future. Like, say, for instance, you have trouble understanding the teachings, and so you think, by my persevering now and understanding this, may I be able to eliminate that same kind of fear and frustration in other people's minds in the future. Yeah, good. Anyone have something they wanted to... Bonnie, did you have any that resonated with you? Uh-huh. You would waste it.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't waste it, but that's what
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So here, one thing I noticed is sometimes some of you are trying to find, not in this case, but sometimes some of the others were trying to find a correlation of something that we did this lifetime. These are mainly talking about karmic consequences, I think, drawn from the sutras and other shastras and sutras, where the Buddha explained the effects of karma. Otherwise, how could you know that these kinds of actions give those kinds of results? There's something that the Buddha's mind can understand. So, in one way, you may notice, once you understand what the karmic cause of something is that you're experiencing, say, this is the wheel of sharp weapons coming back, you may not remember throwing it out. You may not remember creating that cause, right, in the past. But by experiencing the result now, you may recognize that you have some tendency to do that. And you can not only regret having done it in the past, even though you can't recall doing it. Because there's numberless actions we've done in past lives we don't remember now, right? But we can still regret them. One way that we can regret them is when we actually encounter some of their fruits. We think, uh-oh, I must have done this in the past, understanding karma from a text like this, and then make a determination not to do that again in this lifetime. When you hear harsh words, when you hear criticism, when you're devoid of friends, when hardship comes, recognizing what the causes are, and yourself experiencing suffering, wishing others to be free of that suffering, make a determination not to create that activity again in the future. Okay. So a little bit later I'll ask some of the rest of you if you had some ones that resonated with you. Done.
You said there was sutra and shastra?
Is that, you thought that's one of the ladies out on the Vajrapani Tirtha?
Is it Shasta or Shastra?
It's not Shasta. That's the lady that lives in Boulder Creek, I think, is it? No, this is Shastra. Shastra's in the, remember in the Buddhist teachings in the monasteries, we have the Kangyur and the Tengyur. Do you remember what those were? You don't remember. The Kangyur was the translation of what? The proclamations of the Buddha. So that's includes the Sutra Pitaka, the Vinaya Pitaka, the Abhidharma Pitaka, the Tripitaka, essentially. And it also includes the Tantric teachings, which have their similar kind of Tripitaka also. So all that which was spoken by the Buddha, the Kangyur. And then the Tengyur is, gyur means translation. So Kagyur means translation of the speech of the Buddha. That which was Buddha Vachana, they call it. And the Tengyur is a translation of the Shastras. Tenche in Tibetan means Shastra. It's the commentaries by those who were very close in time in India to the Buddha. So usually it's just Indian texts that are found that are called Shastras. In the Tengyur anyway. The Tengyur means the Tencho Gyurwa, the translation of the Shastras. And those are the commentaries by the great beings who experienced Lord Buddha's teachings in close proximity to his time and in India, and who wrote commentaries on it through that tradition that was very alive and being passed on. And those texts are considered very holy in Tibet, in Tibetan Buddhism. There's only one or two texts that were composed by Tibetans that are found in the Tengyur. Do you know what they are? I can't remember. There might be one text in the Tengyur, not in the Kangyur. Kangyur is just the actual teachings of Buddha as preserved in the Tripitaka and the Tantric teachings. So Shastra, we sometimes say sutras and shastras. So sutras is a general, in this case it doesn't mean Sutra Pitaka, it means, perhaps as Diana was using it, as meaning all of those dialogues, all of the collection of teachings of the Buddha, and the shastras are the commentaries on them. Okay. So, last time, I think we're going along okay. What do you think? I think we're almost catching up here. Last time we got up to verse 76, or no? We just finished 75? Aha, Emma. Although my endurance for meditation is small, my precognition is sharp. We talked about that, right? The contradiction there. I sort of think that I have clairvoyance or something. So 76. When someone gives me useful advice, my hostile mind takes that person for an enemy. Do you know what that means, take someone for an enemy? It means perceives them as an enemy, right? Easily. When someone gives me useful advice, dangsam is the Tibetan word here, means my angry mind or my hostile mind perceives that person that's giving me advice beneficially as an enemy. That happens very, very often. Often when we're kids, isn't it? You know, someone gave us advice and, you know, I don't know, what do kids say now? Who's a mother or who's a teacher? What do they say? Whatever. Yeah. Do you have kids? Do you have kids? Do you have kids? No? Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. We said that. Yeah.
My daughter says, thanks for the advice, Mom.
Yeah. It sounds like she's, yeah, right. Thanks a lot, Mom. Right? So, when someone deceives me, gokor luna, when someone, confuses me with deception, I repay that heartless one with kindness. Ningmei tinduse. So that's often the case in the world. It's just like, the Tibetan lamas used to say, some of the great teachers in Tibet were not recognized as teachers. It was the ones that said things that seemed to accord with people's wishes, what they wanted to hear. That they thought, I'm going to give this lama great, offerings, bring big sides of sheep and big things of butter to them, repay their kindness to that person that wasn't really helping them. Also in the world, people who deceive us with flattery, say sweet things about us out of some kind of expectation, we often repay them. So this is the wheel of sharp weapons, coming back from that same kind of activity in the past, this is what we've done habitually again and again. So recognizing that, try to be aware when we hear advice. Sometimes sometimes people mean to be helpful, but maybe their advice is not, because it's coming out of self-cherishing or out of ignorance or whatever. But not to consider that person as an enemy. Have you found yourself ever doing that? Do you ever find yourself doing that?
I was just thinking of this
George, because I recall a few instances in my life where I've not been kind to someone who was trying to help me, and then they would leave, I'd go somewhere, and then I'd regret it, and then I'd want to remember to do something kind to turn that situation around, so someone else that was less kind to me might approach me, or somehow there was that moment where we had an engagement. And I remember thinking, I want to be kind, and I'm repaying that other person that was nice to me, but I'm repaying it to a person who's not kind to me. So it's like that.
Well, like for instance, how can one see this? How could one repay? How could one begin to change and see this? If what's happened when someone gives me useful advice, I take that person for an enemy. And we find the same thing happening then in our own lives. When we give useful advice to others, others take us as an enemy, isn't it? This is the wheel of sharp weapons coming back. So when we notice that, we can start to, when we're taken as an enemy, when we give advice to others, we can recognize this is the result of ourself not relating to the good advice of others. So when we do hear that advice, to recall that, not to strike out with anger, even if the person is criticizing us. I was telling someone the other day about one of the great texts, the 37 practices of all the Buddha's sons. Have you heard of that? Georgie, have you heard of the 37 practices? And one of the verses in Tome Sambo, I think his name is, great bodhisattva, said that if you find yourself in the town, in a group of people, and others are abusing you, it's the practice of the bodhisattva to accept that criticism, and even to say, oh, thank you, you yourself actually have good qualities. I should mend my ways. This is sort of like an extension of this. What do you think? Think that's impossible? Do you think that would be insincere? What do you think? When others are criticizing you, even if it's baseless. How could you understand it as that person that there's some validity in that person's criticism? Well, there's no way that you could hear that criticism unless you'd created the karma for it in the past. So you must have done something in the past. You've criticized others in the past to be receiving this karma now. And so to be patient with that, and not wanting to hear criticism yourself, and not to retaliate like that. I think the actions of the bodhisattvas are, just mind-boggling when you actually start to think of it. So much different than than the way that many of us, than the way that I act anyway. 77. I tell my intimate friends' secrets to their enemies. Nangmir, intimate friends, maybe family, or housemates, or people that I depend on, and who depend upon me. I tell that to their enemies, and I shamelessly take advantage of my acquaintances. Here I was looking up before this sentence, the second part of it, the way they've translated, I shamelessly take advantage of my acquaintances. It looks like it means to, I steal their, what in English we say, when you really hurt someone, you hurt them to the quick, you steal their heart and soul. What do we say? What do we say else? Here in Tibetan they say lungs and heart. You steal their lungs and heart. He's translated that as, I take advantage. So, I shamelessly take advantage of or shamelessly, without consideration, steal the lungs and heart when others come to assist me. So these are talking about, as I think Geshe Zopa and others were mentioning in their commentaries, that this is talking about particular personality faults. Let me see what Geshe says here. When we do not honor the confidences that our friends have entrusted to us, we're under the influence of self-cherishing attitude. It is very bad to hurt our trusted friends. To do so not only hurts them, but also ourselves through the future consequences of such actions. So I think Geshe was saying that some of these in succession here are talking about different kinds of personality faults that we might notice in others, but certainly, even if we don't have them prominent in ourself right now, we have the potential for all of them. Does it make sense? What do you think? 78. My frustration is intent, and my thoughts are coarser than everyone else's. I am hard to get along with and continually provoke others' bad character. Okay, not too bad. I think the beginning of the sentence, kolong damla, Kolong is actually means envy or jealousy more. I mean, it can mean dissatisfaction. Maybe dissatisfaction rather than frustration. I'm not sure frustration has a quite flavor. Like dissatisfaction because others have something that I don't have, or maybe frustration. I hold on to that. Dam can mean I'm bound by that. Here it says my frustration is intense, and maybe we could say my preconceptions are coarser than anyone's. Who has coarser preconceptions than I do? Opinionatedness. Most of the things that we think of, we think things should be this way or that way or whatever. Most of them are what the Buddha called namtok. Have you ever heard that word, namtok? Nambar tokpa. It's not just the tokpa that we learn in Lorig that means conception, but it means conceptualizing mind. It means the kind of state of mind that rises, that kind of, in there is discursiveness, which is kind of like kuntok. And namtok, nambar tokpa means just, how did Lama used to translate, like hallucination, your own thinking about something, your own opinion about something. I'm tied by jealousy and my conceptualizations, how did I translate here? Are coarser than anyone's. I'm hard to get along with, jokbar kala, hard to get along with. Here it says, I constantly provoke others' bad character. Actually, I think what it means is, I constantly bring up my own bad character. Jokbar kala, hard to get along with, hard to be friendly, hard to be friends with me. Shinyan, that means bad personality, bad nature. Gyundrulong, is constantly arises. I don't think it's talking about I provoke others so much as this is talking about my own character. Full of dissatisfaction, hard to get along with, and I constantly give rise to my bad behavior, bad personality. Maybe after some years of practicing the Dharma, we can notice that we're not quite as bad as we used to be. Maybe sometimes we don't think of ourselves as bad, that our personality is so troublesome or critical or fault finding or whatever. But in the eye of Dharma, we can start to see that in our own lives, and over some period of time, as we start to see this is something that's going to cause the same thing to come back to me. I'm going to be assailed by others' bad nature and by their conceptualizations, their preconceptions, maybe we can say. So for the benefit of others, to bear with that, as some of you were saying, not in different levels, to see it as the wheel of sharp weapons coming back. You take your attention away from any kind of situation that's happening to you. You can take your attention away from it, seeing it as inherently existent and as really bad and so forth, and recognize it as arising due to karma, due to familiarization, and that if you want to try to change this, you have to change your way of acting. You have to change your personality. 79. When someone seeks my assistance, I ignore him, well, her, and secretly cause him harm. When someone agrees with me, I won't concur, but seek quarrels even at a distance. Oy.
That's what a devil's advocate, when you argue with anybody, just to argue. Even the person that agrees with you.
It might be something like that, but sometimes people that consider themselves devil's advocates, or maybe just argumentative, yeah. Maybe some people that might be one kind of it, but there are other kinds of argumentative personalities that aren't necessarily just taking the other side for the sake, but they're just argumentative by nature. Here it says, when someone seeks my assistance, I'm not sure that's not the word here. It says cholna. Chol means when to be advised or entrusted with some information or some instruction. When compelled, maybe. So, or if entrusted or advised, I don't listen. But opposite to that, there's another. Here it says kokna, which means they've taken it secretly. There's another translation in one of the actual Tibetan texts where it says lokne. That means I turn away instead of listening to what they said. I do the opposite and give harm. I harm them. So when they've given me some advice, when someone gives me some advice, instead of listening, I do the opposite and I give them harm. I do what is harmful. Here it says, when someone agrees with me, I won't concur, but seek quarrels even at a distance. At a distance, I don't think is the right. Is maybe further. I seek further quarrels. When others agree with me, and I don't, or when how does it say? When someone agrees with me, when others concur, they're trying to be, how to say, peaceful or whatever. I even seek other quarrels at a distance. I don't know. Doesn't make a lot of sense in English. Does that make any sense to you? Seek quarrels even at a distance. Maybe the translator thought that was talking about they're in some other city and I still keep writing them letters or emails or something like that. Even they've left, I don't think it means that. I think it means further. Kyangna or Kyangne.
Do you think that could be something like backbiting or talking behind someone's back or spreading bad rumors?
When someone agrees with me, I won't acquiesce but seek further quarrels?
Seek quarrels even at a distance. That's what comes to mind with me.
Or maybe that person's trying to distance himself from the person by not identifying.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure where backbiting would come in, but maybe. When someone seeks my assistance, I ignore him and secretly cause him harm. Let me read you what Geshe Darge said about this one. In his text, I think this was verse 80. We're missing Oma Darlene today. Here he says, advised to follow certain disciplines. So it's a little, here I thought it, instead of saying, when someone seeks my assistance. Chol doesn't mean seek. It means to be entrusted or advised. It says, advised to follow certain disciplines, we ignore it and do the opposite out of malice and spite. If someone tries to become close to us and seeks our advice, though we should be kind to him, if someone tries to be close to us and seeks our advice, though we should be kind to him, we try in every way to oppose and disgrace him. As this too arises from self-cherishing, trample him and rip out his heart. This is talking about, who is this talking about? The person who does this? The person who's giving you a hard time? No, it's talking about your, what? Self-cherishing thought and self-grasping, which is the cause of that self-cherishing thought. All of these are worthy of contemplation if you get a chance, having thought about them. Maybe if you take some notes and you read the other commentaries and meditate on these. This is what the real purpose of listening to this is, not just to sit here and just once to hear things, but to maybe in your book or on your notes to make some notes and to think about them again and again. 80. I do not appreciate advice, and I'm always difficult to be with. Similar kind of personality faults that are coming up here. Many things offend me, and my clinging is always strong. Again, I'm not sure this has the right flavor. Kalomide. I do not appreciate advice. So, Kalodewa means to be attentive or to someone who easily understands when they are advised to do something. Dewa sometimes means happy, that means, or appreciative. Sometimes it means easy, like something which is easy, that's pleasant to do. Kalomide. Taktu choparka, always difficult to get along with. I don't easily take advice, maybe we could say that. I don't happily take advice. What do I say? Don't suffer fools easily? Is that a similar kind of thing? Do you know that expression? You never heard that expression? He doesn't, is that coming from Shakespeare, or where does that come from? He doesn't suffer fools gladly. Who's our resident, must be Bonnie, our resident academician, huh? I think if you take a look on the I think maybe it comes from Shakespeare. To not suffer fools gladly means what? What does that mean? When working with people that you think don't understand what you mean, they don't understand, to not be patient with them, to not suffer fools gladly. You've heard of that expression, huh? Yeah, okay. What is that? What it means?
To me, it means that.
It means that, yeah.
No patience.
Pardon?
No patience.
No patience. No patience with insufferable sentient beings.
These last four, so it sounds like that part of us that wants to be right, to, someone gives us good advice, we'll say, I am better, to be judgmental, that self-grasping part.
Yeah, always to be right. Always to be, yeah. How important is it to always be right? If you think about it, what does it profit you to be right? Maybe sometime to be a little more humble. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mhm. Well, sometimes you might know, someone might not be. Say a little child comes up to you and says you shouldn't give money to the beggars, They might even mean well, but sometimes they're doing it out of selfish mind or malicious mind, or not understanding what the purpose is, telling you, you're being selfish. You're trying to do some kind of project that's going to have benefit for many, many people. And someone tells, "Oh, you're being selfish. You want to be famous," or something like that.
So just accept it's so boring.
Well, you don't have to react, but you have to weigh, you have to use your wisdom. It doesn't mean that every time someone criticizes you that their criticism is valid, but to recognize the criticism comes about because you've criticized others in the past. Sometimes even the Buddha was criticized. I think many times, many great beings of the past were criticized when they had no fault whatsoever, let alone ourselves when we do have faults. Of course we're going to be criticized. So it's not so much talking that you have to accept the criticism. The criticism may be or may not be valid. You have to use your wisdom to check that. But how to deal with the reaction of anger coming up, or that no, don't criticize me. I never make mistakes. A bodhisattva would check, and of course, not necessarily just because others they talk about the outer witness and the inner witness. The outer witness are other beings, how they feel about you. What's more important is the inner witness, whether you know what you're doing is done out of good motivation and so forth. Others may criticize you all they want, and that's the result of your past karma, and you can deal with that. But that doesn't mean you have to, they could be completely, people say, oh, you're not, you don't know what you're talking about, you're not teaching well, you're explained wrong, this and this. It doesn't mean that they're right. It could be that they're completely deluded. Do we have time for one more? We have two more? One more? Okay.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I exalt myself above the high and the low and consider holy people to be my enemies. This often happens when people give us good advice. The holy beings, we often think of them as enemies. Because my lust is great, I energetically pursue young people. What does that mean? Here it says, Duchak chewe shindu dangdulen. Maybe we could say, I eagerly go after the young out of great attachment. So this is talking about, here there's one other reading. Instead of saying to men chasing, I try to put down the high. That's often the case when someone is elevated to a high position. It's our tendency to what's the opposite of putting up on a pedestal? Tearing them down from the pedestal, right? Tearing them down to the ground. And I hold even excellent beings, here it says holy, but excellent beings as enemies. But on the other hand, out of my attachment, I lust after, the youthful figments of my imagination, some, young things, young damsels. What's the opposite? What's a male called? Not a damsel. A buck. Okay, let's take a break on buck. We'll hear your question in the future.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
Shoot.
Well, Mendel and I were talking about artificial intelligence, and I read in some recent science literature that some robots these days have actually been encoded with a string of neuronal pathways that the same as in the human mind. So therefore they have a certain ability to analyze, to reason. So this brings up the question of sentient beings, and given that they had this ability to reason to a certain extent, Could that be considered sentient on some level? Even though it's artificially
Yeah, when do they become
created? Exactly. When do they become sentient beings? That's a big question.
When they have a mind.
Is that not mind, though?
Well, just you said they have the I don't know, neuronal, what did you call it? Neuron sequences in their minds, you said. Actually, we don't know they're their minds. They're some kind of substance that we might call brain or something, right? Or complex, or nexus of cells or something, right? Did you see, what was the movie that Steven Spielberg made? Did you see that? AI? And little boy is actually wants to be loved and so forth and so on. From a Buddhist perspective, you wouldn't be able to create something that has a mind which is newly created, because even the Buddhas can't create mind. It's not as though, like Christian tradition believes that God creates our souls, so in a sense creates our minds, right? In Buddhist perspective, even the Buddhas can't create mind that isn't already existing. They can kind of help to change our minds, or they can change their minds, but they don't create new mind that doesn't exist previously. So it may be that by creating some kind of suitable environment that at a certain point of sophistication, or when people's karma is such, even if it's not that sophisticated, that mind could enter into that and experience that. It could be sentient. In the same way that a tree could become sentient. Trees in general are not sentient beings from a Buddhist perspective. They're living, but they're not sentient. They don't have mind. If you cut the tree, you don't have to worry about, oh, the poor tree is suffering. They don't have feelings. They don't have a mental continuum. They're not experiencing. They don't create karma. They're not the recipients of their past karma, other than the sense of law of cause and effect, that the sprout gives rise to something bigger and bigger. But it is possible if a person has a particular karma, to be born in a tree as their body aggregate. Their mind could, at the time of birth, enter into that and experience life as a tree, and experience people climbing them and twisting their branches and maybe experiencing pain. It's said that at the time of the Buddha, some of the monks who used to spit on the wall of the monastery and maybe urinate on the wall of the monastery outside, and not practice, that after that they were born inside that wall, and they had the experience of being peed on, so to speak, and spit on for a long period of time. But that's not, in general, walls are not sentient beings, right? But it's possible. So I think I mentioned to you before in some conference some years ago, not that long ago, about computers and so forth. His Holiness was asked about computers being sophisticated enough to think, and would they become sentient beings? And his Holiness said essentially the same thing. I think that it would require a mind entering into them, and if they were sufficiently sophisticated, and if the mind stream had the karma to enter into that. And he pointed to the person, apparently, who was asking so eagerly about this. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And he said, and you are creating that karma. By wishing this, So maybe that person will be the first, there'll be some computer. It's not as though the computer then, that you can find the mind anywhere in the computer. The mind is something that's formless. But the mind might be able to enter into that.
Having children, you're not creating a new mind.
You're not creating a new mind. You're providing some vehicle that, if the mind can energize that, and it can begin to bifurcate, and what's the word? Cytosis, what's it called when the cells begin to multiply? Meiosis. And I'm thinking of halitosis. And when the cell gets bigger, because of the presence of mind, that that being can be called a sentient being. It's not as though the parents, by their fertilized egg, created a brain that then, just from its own side, had the ability to think. If a mind did, from Buddhist perspective, if a mind in the intermediate state didn't enter into that fertilized egg, there would be no way for that egg to begin to multiply and to actually be a sentient being.
At what point, like, for instance, is a single-cell organism a sentient being? Is there, because insects are sentient beings, but does it go down all the way down to like single-celled organisms and bacteria or viruses or
3.7 cells.
3.7
No, I don't know. You're asking me something I have no idea. Buddha,
Okay.
it's not clear to me. I remember someone once asking Geshe Darge in class in Dharamsala many years ago, aren't you killing when you eat yogurt? Because there are all these bacteria in the yogurt, right? Is that right? And most of them are, some of them are still alive, otherwise, not all of them are alive. Some of them die in their own juices, so to speak. And, pardon?
What a way to think of
But whether they're actually sentient or not, I don't know. Geshe said he didn't know. It's the Buddha. He quoted something the Buddha said once. He used to think that all of the organisms in the all of the living things that were in a pond or in a when there was a pool of water after the rain were sentient. But to know that, you'd have to have clairvoyance. So I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't know. There's nothing that I've found in the scriptures. And when I've asked lamas about that, maybe perhaps because it isn't said in the scriptures, they don't want to demonstrate their own clairvoyance and supersede. Maybe the Buddha didn't say that for some reason. Explain at what point. So about this one, with our verse number 81. Here in Geshe Darge's text is called 82. We feel threatened by the high status others have achieved through great study and practice. This is kind of the connection between them. Instead of rejoicing, we're jealous and obnoxiously backbiting. Maybe this is where Thea got backbiting from before. Is that where you got? We look at holy beings as threatening enemies rather than objects of veneration. At the same time, we are overwhelmed by blatant longing desire and seek out random sexual partners. So that's kind of the meaning here. Shundu dangdu len, we eagerly seek the youthful. It means youthful kind of in the sense of in lust, in terms of sexual partners. As this is also caused by self-cherishing concern, trample him and rip out his heart. The author of the commentary, and so that's not the text itself, I think there's a commentary that Geshe Darge was using and Geshe Soquel was using, said, whenever the great scholars debate in the great cathedral, I think that means in Lhasa, the great, in the Potala perhaps, in the Jokang maybe, I rejoice and wish that I myself may one day do the same. Because the commentary may have been written by a Tibetan Lama, maybe not by an Indian. I rejoice and I wish that myself may one day do the same. Again, I rejoice at others' discourses and request the holder of the Ganden throne, the Ganden tradition, that I may do the same. When you hear others giving teachings, rather than feeling jealousy, to sort of aspire that you might do the same, rejoice in that. Never have I harbored a negative thought about other people's high status. So that's useful advice. Yeah. We want to put down the high, but we ourselves chase after something bunnies. I can't remember what it's, muffins or something like that. Okay, 82. Because my friendships are of short duration, I cast aside former acquaintances. Because my new friends are many, I lay before them empty promises of enjoyments. Here is the Chitak Tungwe Ngadrok Kyangru pen. So I cast aside, cast to a long distance, old friends out of, a sense of, what's the, a word that would mean having no longevity to one's, commitment. Was it? Fickle? Yeah, maybe out of fickle. Here it says chitak tung means short duration in the future. And that can have different meanings in different contexts. Here it says, because my friendships are of short duration, I cast aside former acquaintances. Does that ring a bell with any kind of in either our own behavior or in the behavior of others? Sometimes, because we don't have longevity of our concern for others, our concern is very superficial, and our relationship with others is often based on what they can give us or what is right at the present, and we don't necessarily have a continuity of that. We toss them aside. Because my new friends are many, I lay before them empty promises of enjoyment. I'm not sure about the empty promises. There are several different variations in the couple of Tibetan texts that are, excuse me, that are available. Kunla Katro Ting. Ting means like the monks and nuns, this little carpet that is a cushion cover is called a dingwa, something that's spread out over the cushions to protect the property of the laity or the monastery. So if their robes are dirty or if their feet are dirty or whatever, they wouldn't get the clothes, the sofas or the carpets of the patrons dirty, so they would carry their dingwa. So dingwa means that which is laid out. So it's the same word here. I lay out, how does he say it here? I lay before them empty promises of enjoyment. I'm not sure, empty promises of enjoyment. The Kato, one translation of that has it meaning that which is attractive. I put out attractive things since I have many new acquaintances. I'm going to say, I'm not constant, is that the word we say, to old friends, but I put on a big show for a lot of new friends. So I'm constantly forgetting about the kindness of those that had come in the past. I remember some of my teachers saying, Soquel Senshab Rinpoche used to say many, many times that, if someone gave you $100 many, many years ago when you were a kid, you may have forgotten about that, but actually they were very, very, very kind to you. Now today someone gives you $100, and because of the freshness of that in your mind, you think of them as very kind, and you make all sorts of, smiles to them, and perhaps sometimes out of not just repaying their kindness now, but out of a sense of showing your appreciation, so they'll give you some more. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of related with that also. Because I don't have a lot of constancy, I set aside old friends. But on the other hand, because there's a great number of new friends, I set out all sorts of pleasurable things for them. So it could mean also, I put on a pleasant disposition for them. So these are all the results of self-cherishing thought, not recalling our old friends, people that have been kind to us in the past, that have helped us, setting them aside, and sometimes looking for new friends. 83. Having no precognition, I eagerly resort to lying and deprecation. Having no compassion, I snatch away the confidence from others' hearts. Again, I'm not quite sure. I think they went through a bad spell in translating in these sections here. It may make sense to you, but it didn't make much sense to me. Ngunshemebe zunkur dangrulen. Dangrulemba means to do something eagerly, or what's the word? When you do it without being forced to do something. What do you call it? Willingly. I willingly deprecate falsely because I have no clairvoyance. I think that's what it's talking about. I'm quick to deprecate, and usually falsely, because I don't have any clairvoyance. I don't know what other people's minds are, so I'm often expressing my opinions about them, which turned out to be deprecations. You know what deprecation means? What's deprecation mean? Marilyn? Dan? To harm? To deprecate. Do you know?
To make less. That's right. To put down.
To not appreciate. It means to lessen what is actually there. To belittle. Okay, good. Belittle. Having no compassion, I snatch away the confidence from others' hearts. This snatch away, I think this verb also means to beat. And lote means, which is kind of like those that are trusted, where our minds find trust. So it means, it could mean I beat on the essence, the heart of those that are trustworthy out of a lack of compassion, those that to whom I should have trust. Let's see what Geshe Soquel said in his commentary here. This verse is about the kind of person who tries to impress people by falsely claiming to have supernatural powers. When this deception is discovered, others will treat him or her very badly. Such a person has little compassion for those close to him. This lack of sincerity, love, and compassion causes such a person great pain and suffering. He or she experiences misfortune and tries to blame others, striking out at those nearby. I think Geshe Darge also had something on this one that was, this is in 84 in Geshe's text. Although we lack extrasensory powers, we accept requests for divinations, but then making false predictions, we eventually have to face the consequences. Okay, so here it Ngunshe Mebe, without clairvoyance, or, since we don't have clairvoyance, even though we don't have clairvoyance, you might say, we gladly take up things like maybe making divinations, but we falsely deprecate, we give false, we're not actually giving real advice to them because we don't have clairvoyance, we don't have special powers. we eventually have to face the consequences. If we had compassion, we would avoid hurting our companions, but having little or none, we try to retaliate if someone hurts us. Do not return trust with hurt feelings or disappointment. So if someone gives us trust, here's the lote, we often give them back something that actually harms them. Geshe said, in this time of the 5 degenerations, it is important to find a noble teacher with great compassion, for only he will care for us, however gross we may be. Meanwhile, taking the self-cherishing attitude as our worst enemy, we should try to eliminate it by whatever means we can. 84. Having studied little, I wildly guess about everything. Since my religious education is slight, I have wrong views about everything. Tupa chungwe kunla barsuche. Suchepa means to guess. So I guess, here it says, I wildly guess, I blazingly guess maybe about everything, because I don't have a lot of learning. And some of you have said, I think Carrie or someone has said to me, why do we study, who is it? Maybe one of the other people, why are we studying this? Because, not just this text or Lorig or whatever, because maybe we didn't study it in previous lives. And in order to accumulate the imprints in our mind to be able to know things and to be able to help people in the future, we have to be able to accumulate. You didn't ask that question, someone was saying. We have to, he gladly accepted the defeat by saying, very kind. We have to now set the seeds in our mind, even if things are unclear at first. I think as one studies along in all of these texts, not just, this text is particularly easy to understand, but say in Lorig or some other courses where the material is more difficult to understand, it takes a certain amount of steadfastness and confidence that over time one will understand. When the boys in the monastery begin to study those subjects, they don't understand anything. They're debating about why a white horse is not white. Did you know that? One of the first debates. They say, is a white horse white? What would you say? They say, it follows that a white horse is white. And Dan would say, duh. It means I accept. Yeah, I agree. And then they say, no, it follows that a white horse is not white. Because a white horse is a being, is a person. And white is a color. So a white horse is a being, and a white horse is not white. So there's some like those little things about grammar that they first study about. So they're not really they're just learning for a long couple of years, sometimes on the grammatical, verbal level, different kinds of things. Then later everything starts to gel together. Having studied little, I wildly guess about everything. So it's worth leaving the seeds now and actually studying a lot so that we don't have to just make guesses about what Buddha taught. Here it says, since my religious education is slight, here it says, Lungyah Chungwei, since the extent of my of scripture is short or brief, I have wrong views about everything. Lokta ke, yongla lokta ke. I produce wrong views about everything. So again, what prevents us from studying and actually reading and so forth is our inertia, our laziness, our sense of inadequacy and so forth. And in order to get over that, we have to see that the cause of that is our self-cherishing thought, our ego grasping. The bodhisattvas I mentioned before, when the big obstacles that they overcome in order to continue practicing are involved in different kinds of laziness. The laziness that's attracted to what we call negative actions. That means just, like just doing, engaging in, in, what was it, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Is that what they are? What did she say?
That was the 10 non-virtues.
Huh?
10 non-virtues.
Those not so attractive. Killing is not such an attractive thing to the bodhisattvas, but negative actions of desire, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I think how about the 10 non-virtues? Usually they're not so attracted to killing or maybe stealing, at the beginning or something, but to objects of attachment. And also there's a sense of laziness because of a lack of courage and a lack of self-deprecation, low self-esteem. They're slightly different. The different kinds of laziness that can occur in the bodhisattva's minds, and they have to meditate on emptiness. They're thinking, oh, I can't understand this. This subject is so hard, and I'm not getting I should be having it, computerized into my mind. It should be easy, and it's just not. All the right conditions are not here. What the great beings of the past? Just to have this kind of instruction, and like about low rig and so forth, is so. It's so rare in the world that someone can explain to you in English. You can have it through a translator if you go to the monastery. You can have a very short session where you won't have a chance to ask your questions. So we've got incredible amount of material. We've got books to read and so forth, but we don't study. So that's why we have wrong views and we guess about things. Even people come and they ask us. Even the New York Times calls us. Well, we guess about what the answer should be. Okay, 85. Habituated to attachment and aversion, I revile everyone opposed to me. Habituated to envy, I slander and deprecate others. Shakdang Gombe, that's good. Habituated to attachment and aversion, I revile everyone opposed to me. Shenchok Monglame, must be Yonglame. I revile everyone opposed to me. So, generally whenever we have when we've made up our mind about something, if someone has a different opinion than us, we revile them, we say they are wrong, Habituated by envy, or here we say jealousy, trakchok gombe, shenla drokur deb. Here it says, I slander and deprecate others. Actually, it means I overestimate and underestimate others. I overestimate some things and I underestimate some things. I overestimate the pleasure that they have, the qualities that I'm jealous about. That's part of the attachment. And I deprecate them. They don't deserve that, and so forth. All of these kinds of states of mind are due to self-cherishing thought. 86. Never studying, I despise the vast teachings. Never relying on a guru, I revile religious instruction. So literally it says, not having done study, lubnir mache, I didn't study, or not studied, gyatchen keduse. So gyatchen means the vast, extensive concourse of the teachings of the Buddha. Keduse, this is a word that's come up a couple of times. You could say I despise, or I kind of ignore. I'm oblivious of it. Keduse means to kill the difference. How could you sort of put that into English when you kill the difference of something? No, not the indifference. If something has qualities and some things are better than others, but you sort of ignore that difference. You're oblivious of it. Okay, here it says I revile. What does it say? I despise the vast teachings. It's not so much that, it's can be that, despise, but kedusu means to not appreciate, not to take into, not to understand the differences of. Never relying on a guru, lama maten, I revile religious instruction. Lungla mubache, I despise or I revile the scriptures. Let me read what Geshe says here. Geshe Soquel. This is very similar to the previous ones. Its target is the person without much knowledge or motivation for learning, who is very, very narrow-minded. When such a person hears the great Buddha's teachings, he or she doesn't accept it and becomes very hostile to it. This negative person who does not rely on a religious teacher or on the teachings is controlled by self-cherishing and creates very unfavorable karma.
What about contempt?
Contempt? How would you say? I have contempt for the scriptures. This is what? 85, right? So Geshe-la's text is 86. If one wishes to attain peerless enlightenment, one must be rich in listening, thinking, and contemplating about the teachings. However, because of habituation with anger and passion, our study becomes partial, and our dharmic discussions spiteful toward our opponents. Sort of like in the debating courtyard, rather than debating for the sake of eliminating your own ignorance or other people's ignorance, you do sort of out of spite. Also, through habituation with jealousy, we overestimate and overreact to the faults of others. Here it said, in this text it said, habituated to envy, I slander and deprecate. So there's two things here, that I overestimate and I underestimate. So here it says I overestimate and overreact to the faults of others, and I underestimate also their good qualities. If someone who was once coarse has become spiritually refined, we are still inclined to doubt him and say that we cannot trust him. Interesting. We don't recognize other people's Buddha potential. Even the Buddha was once mundane. We should not belittle people by their past records, but should judge them for what they are now. We should recognize our own fortune and train our minds in these teachings. It is because of the excessive and habitual familiarity with hatred and longing desire in many previous lives that we belittle others and the results and are strongly attached to our own point of view. This too is the result of self-cherishing. Hatred is the worst obstacle to the development and increase of bodhicitta. While we continue to inflict harm upon others and to undermine their qualities, we will neither develop nor increase bodhicitta. We do not cultivate jealousy, yet out of habit we are intolerant with the qualities of others. I think what he means is we don't consciously cultivate jealousy. As is said in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, having taken vows to liberate all sentient beings, if by themselves they should find happiness, we should never be jealous. So I think there's if you think again and again, my purpose is ultimately to bring happiness to others. If someone finds happiness by themselves, you can think, oh, fantastic, I don't have to worry about them any longer, rather than being jealous of their happiness. However, being habitually jealous, we denigrate, repudiate, and abuse others. We both overestimate and underestimate them. We exaggerate their bad qualities and underestimate their good qualities. Seeing that this too is caused by the self-cherishing, we should dance upon the head of this traitor who destroys our chances of final release. Instead of explaining the scriptures, I falsely set up my own system. Not having mastered pure vision, I curse and yell. I'm not sure where they got that from. I curse and yell. Okay. Instead of explaining the scriptures, it says Deno means the Sutra Pitaka. Not explaining the Sutra Pitaka, Rang so zundu dik. I set up falsely some sort of self-constructed system. That happens a lot today, isn't it? I mean, even if you didn't believe in the Buddhist scriptures, people are sort of inventing their own kinds of systems and becoming very popular because they're charismatic or, attractive, or they charge a lot for their courses or whatever. Sometimes there are some. It's like the case. Sometimes the courses that are most expensive. One friend was telling me that if you gave a course in Silicon Valley and only charged, a low amount of money for it, many executives wouldn't come. It's only if you charge, like, for the weekend, $3,000. Then they think, well, that's worthy of coming to you. Because but oftentimes it's something that people have just made up themselves. Not having mastered pure vision. I mean, here it says, not trained in pure vision. Not purified by pure vision. It says, I curse and yell. I'm not sure that's the right. Here it says, labsa barsha ma in Tibetan, which they say, what do they say? I curse and yell. Labsa could mean the measure of my speech is to speak sort of false words or negative words. So I haven't, people sort of making up their own systems today. They say they've had visions, they've seen this deity or that deity, or they've, realized something directly without reliance on the scriptures, without actually having studied them. And in that case, the measure of what they're saying is no more than just harmful speech. Is no more than just, lying. Here, Geshe-la, I think, had a nice expression here. Instead of teaching from the three baskets, this is the Sutra Pitaka, the Dena, the Pitakas, I should say. It means the three Pitakas, Dena, Sum. Instead of teaching from the three baskets, we do the opposite. Being antagonistic toward them, we claim to have experimental, I think it means experiential, visions from dreams and letters from space. Okay, I saw it. Teaching from these sources, from one's supposed self-realization, is extremely detrimental. Instead of developing good thoughts toward others, we make cynical and sarcastic remarks to and about them. We should have pure thoughts toward others, tenets and practices. Our mistakes arise from self-cherishing. So all of these kinds of mistakes arise again from self-cherishing mind. '88. Without condemning sacrilegious activities, I launch numerous criticisms against all the Buddha's words. Without condemning, without pointing out the fault, the wrongness, not reviling or condemning. Chumin means chumin lei means non-dharmic activities. Here it says sacrilegious, non-dharmic activities. Like in my own, the example I think Geshe Dargi gave was like if you recall in your own mind some kind of bad behavior that we engaged in the past, instead of feeling regret about that, we think, I really got them. At that time I really got them. Or, I really got that thing that I wanted that was so pleasurable. Instead of regretting about those things, we do the opposite. We don't condemn them. Lekshe Yongla Sunjin Natso Tong. Here it says, I launch numerous criticisms. Sunjin Tong. I give, you could say, critiques or criticisms to the extensive good explanations. Lekshe Yongla Sungjin Natsok Tong. We do not hold actions contrary to the Dharma in contempt, but willingly embrace them. For example, when we think of something spiteful we once said to someone we dislike, we rejoice at the hurt to him. Similarly, when we finally catch an irritating flea, we crush him gleefully. This is more Tibetan. I don't know. Do you do that? Maybe when you've caught some people, when they've caught that fly that was buzzing around their head for such a long time, they gleefully toss it in the fire or something like that. Or there are all sorts of kind of things to. It's amazing. These kind of things to kill the bugs. Do you see the electric wires and all sorts of things? Yeah. So basically, what it's saying is, I don't condemn what's sacrilegious, but I do condemn what is, well explained, the teachings of the Buddha and the commentaries about them. It's not clear enough, is it this or this, but I don't condemn my own non-dharmic activities. 89, similar. Having no shame about things I should be ashamed of, I am perversely ashamed of the Dharma, which is not something shameful. So this is one of those verses in Tibetan that sounds very cute because it has the ngotsa. Ngotsa means shame. Many times this is ngoshe nela ngosha mizin par ngomi sala ngose chologzin. So I perversely hold the Dharma, which is not something shameful. Ngomi sala. I hold it as an object of shame. What's that talking about? Any idea? Karen? Any idea? Pardon? Having no shame about things I should be ashamed of, I'm perversely ashamed of the Dharma. How are you ashamed of the Dharma? What did Geshe Soquel say? Okay. Didn't give so much comment. So, Geshe Damandargi said, we do not regard objects of embarrassment as shameful, nor are we ashamed of indulging in the shameful, non-religious things, but being especially unconcerned about transgressing the vows we have taken before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, we are proud and ostentatious about our downfalls. On the contrary, we are embarrassed about things for which we need feel no shame. For instance, when a rich man is converted to practicing the Dharma and gives up his wealth and goods, we are embarrassed and ashamed of him. I'm not sure. What do you think? Does that make sense? Lack of wealth is no cause for shame. Oftentimes we're ashamed of maybe we're not beautiful, or we're not rich, or we're not liked, and we feel shame. Those are things that are not objects of shame. It's not something that we have done now. Maybe they're the results of not having practiced generosity or not having been kind to others in the past. But falling in hard times and so forth and not being liked, not being attractive, those are not the things that we should be ashamed of. Milarepa's sister came when he was living in the cave and said, "Oh, you poor thing, you don't have any clothes, you don't have any food." And she wasn't feeling ashamed of him so much. Maybe a little bit she was kind of ashamed in a sense, but she was kind of thinking that he was not an object of rejoicing. But he was saying, you're the person who's actually the pitiful one. You're not practicing the Dharma. I am incredibly blissful. Geshe said, Gelwa Jampa Gyatso. When we say Gelwa, usually that means the victor, the conqueror. Usually that's one of the ways that they refer to the Dalai Lamas. Gelwa Jampa Gyatso was the 8th Dalai Lama, He once said of his teacher Kachan Yeshe Gelsen, who was the teacher that I think wrote the Mind and Mental Factors text that we'll be studying next year, next term or whatever, about the 51 mental factors. He said about him, Kachan Yeshe Gelsen, "My tutor had a harder time than Milarepa, who at least had good tasting nettle soup, and sometimes sampa. My teacher wasn't able to have even those. Indeed, even his statue shows him as frail." Okay. Anyway, that's kind of the flavor of that one. Instead of being ashamed of things we should be ashamed about, negative actions, we're unshamed about those, but we're ashamed of things that there's no need to be ashamed about, such as the holy Dharma and practicing and so forth, and not having wealth and so forth, spending our time not keeping, not looking like movie star or something. 90. No matter what I do, it is never done right. Everything I do is inappropriate. It sounds like the ranting of sound like someone with low self-esteem, right? That's. I don't think that's a. I'm not sure that's a good translation. Let's see. Chena rungwa chikyang machepar. Not having done even one thing suitably, I do everything. I do all actions inappropriate. Not having done even one suitable thing, I do everything that's unsuitable. I think it's maybe that's slight in my mind. That's a little bit slightly different. It's talking about what we engage in. We usually don't do very many virtuous actions or actions that are actually appropriate, but we engage in all sorts of things that are inappropriate. This is the flavor of this one. Geshe-Nawandarge said, "We do not do things worth doing, which are the methods for achieving liberation and enlightenment. From beginningless time, we've indulged in improper, unwholesome actions, the cause of which is self-cherishing attitude." And Geshe Sopa Rinpoche said, "This verse is about bad behavior in general, doing everything incorrectly all of the time. The root cause of all our suffering in cyclic existence is egocentrism, a self-centered way of thinking that grasps I or me as something absolute, ultimate. This way of thinking traps sentient beings in cyclic existence. In order to escape from it, we must free ourselves from this view of a real personal identity. The sharp-wielded weapon turns back upon us. In all our lives, we have been under the power of the view of a real personal identity." Do you know what that means, the view of a real personal identity? View, in this case, is talking about a state of mind. Tawa is talking about a wrong view in this case, a perverted view, a deluded view, afflicted view, that perceives a self-identity that doesn't really exist. It's like seeing shadows on the wall, seeing shadows or the rocks in a certain position and thinking it's the boogeyman, right? In all our lives, we have been under the power of the view of a real personal identity and the self-cherishing attitude. These two are like evil kings dwelling within our minds and causing us much misery. We should think, because of the power of these two evil forces, I and all others and all other beings are suffering. Therefore, I must separate myself from them. I must work for the benefit of other sentient beings and not think of myself. I must joyfully accept any hardships or undesirable things that happen to me while working for the welfare of sentient beings. No matter what misfortune befalls me, I will happily take it upon myself and make it into something of benefit to others. So usually when things get tough, what was the expression in English? When the going gets tough, the tough get going, or something like that. There can be some good idea there, but it doesn't mean that they get going and fight off the enemy. You know, when the going gets tough, you know, they get out and they use their muscles and they get tough. The tough get going. Like a bodhisattva, you should think, I am glad that these negative things are happening to me. I am glad that I am receiving the consequences of my bad actions, so the effects of these bad actions will be eliminated. So to have a happy mind in adversity, because as soon as your mind starts to get unhappy, then the hostile mind that finds fault with others and seeks out the reasons for that unhappiness somewhere outside start to arise. So it's very important to try to have a happy mind. In Tantra, there's very special methods to have that kind of blissful mind all the time. So up till now, these verses have been talking about certain kind of personality defects, up till 90 here. Geshe says, the previous verses give many examples of the evils created by our inner demons. Now we're going to call on Yamantaka. And Geshe Darge said, until this verse we have talked about the demerits of self-cherishing and the need to recognize these disadvantages. Now Yamantaka is entreated. So now these verses that before finished all the time, there were many of them in a row that finished with roar and thunder on the head of the destroyer, false construction. Mortally strike at the heart of the butcher, the enemy ego. Whereas I think to my own mind, some of these other, the translation in here is better. Trample him, dance on the head of the treacherous concept of selfish concern. Tear out the heart of the self-centered butcher who slaughters our chance to gain final release. It's a translation of the same words, but comes out sounding quite differently. What we're trying to destroy is not ourself, you know. It's not like you can just, you know, punish yourself and therefore bring about some, you know, out of a sense of guilt. Sometimes people that have low self-esteem, they harm themselves. They cut themselves with razors, or they don't eat. They become what was the word, anorexic or bulimic. Is it the same thing? Anorexia and bulimia? Similar?
No, it's still an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Bulimia is where they overeat and then they purge. And then anorexia is,
Nice word. They purge.
that's the word they use.
That's right. One can always find a nice word. They purge. I'm going to purge. So often, yeah, out of low self-esteem, instead of punishing the real cause of our problems, self-cherishing thought and the ego grasping, we punish ourself. Remember when we said at the beginning, you had to find the vital spot. This is an example of a person, we know people like this, that haven't, not recognizing that, not having been studied, not having a clear enough mind for a long enough time to recognize what the real problem is. So they blame themselves, the self which is merely labeled onto these aggregates. So they harm the aggregates. They don't think they're worthy of love. They don't think they're worthy of others' affection. They don't think they're worthy of food sometimes, in some cases. So that could be maybe the anorexia, I'm not sure. There can be other reasons also. People engage in that because they think they've gotten too big or whatever, and so the self-esteem is low that way. But this is what we have to find here is the real enemy is not our body, not our not our self. It's something that dwells within our mind. It's not something that dwells within our body. Just eating as much as the kitchen might like to say, or someone might say, everything will be cured if you eat organic food or something. I'm not sure. I'm joking. From a Buddhist perspective, that's not the way to bring about real transformation. Of course, you have to be healthy. I'm not saying that eating healthy food is not important. But that's not the main way to bring about transformation. That can heal one temporarily, but even once healed temporarily, the same, if the karmic causes are not eliminated from one's mind, the habit energy is not subdued, that's going to come back again and again. So we have to get at the real core of the problem and use those other things, whatever, good, what do you call it? Good eating, what's that called?
Diet?
Good diet? No, there's some other, nutrition, and other kinds of healthful behavior are just adjuncts of the path. That's not the main thing. That's not the main way to bring about liberation either. It's not by causing one's body or self to suffer or by enhancing the body and the health of the body by taking nutrients and food. But it's by what we're trying to find is the real cause of the problem lies within our mind, particular ignorant way of that's apprehending a self-identity that doesn't exist, and as a result of that, bringing about egocentric behavior, self-cherishing attitude that causes us to engage in harmful behavior that has karmic consequences upon us and others, makes us unable to find the time to help others, to broaden our attitude, to be generous and kind. Very, very limiting. So let's dedicate here the merits that we created, and next time we'll start this next set of verses. Hopefully you'll get a chance to read that and think about it and look over, maybe read. How long would it take you to read up to stanza 90? 90 minutes? No. How long would it take you to read each verse? Half a minute? 45 minutes. Come on. That's Marilyn's homework for next time. Read, because she came late. No, just read through them again and try to recall what we said. And if you don't recall, to go back and look at the commentary of Geshe-la, look at your notes. Ask Thea, who's taken extensive notes. Who else taken extensive notes? Diana's taken extensive notes. Don's taken extensive notes. Have you taken extensive notes? No, you haven't. Carrie's taken extensive notes. Medium notes. Mediumly extensive. Ask Dorje, whose mind is like an ocean and has absorbed all of this. Karen, who's taken extensive notes. And Dan, who's taken extensive notes. Or quasi-extensive notes. Okay. So let's dedicate the energy that we've created, even a couple of moments tonight, having a flash of sense of regret for negative actions we've done or behavior or energy in our mind. I should act in this way. Inspiration. Even hearing the teachings from the side of the object, some virtuous karma has been accrued, but mainly through our motivation. I think due to these merits, may I quickly achieve enlightenment. Even have the fortune, this life or next, through the practice of Tantra, to practice on the basis of these bodhisattva teachings, the very rare and precious and extremely rapid tantric vehicle, on the basis of understanding how to transform adverse conditions into the path for the benefit of all beings today in this incredibly degenerate time when so much pride, arrogance, so much aggression, so much acquisitiveness, possessiveness, just reading the newspapers, looking at the news, so much sign of suffering in people's minds. Wouldn't it be wonderful if during this time we could cultivate a very special mind and be an inspiration to others, even a few at first? Due to these merits, may I quickly achieve enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. And then try to seal that so that one is not grasping to the merits as something real or to the goal of our enlightenment for the welfare of all real sentient beings, nor grasping to the real dedication that we've just made, something really, I've really made dedication. Try to seal them in the emptiness of the three spheres. There are no truly findable merits, although they function and bring their result. They're just labeled by the mind on this dependent arising. Nor are there the state of real enlightenment, findable, existing inherently from its own side, that will bring benefit to real sentient beings. All these are just conceptually imputed, although they do appear and function within the conventional realm. And the act of dedication, my mind, the being of myself, my person, the wish that these merits ripen in that way, all of these are just conceptually imputed. They can't be found anywhere from their own side. Just a name that we attribute the act of dedication to these moments of mental activity, viewing the merits and the goal. Without expectation, but with total confidence in the infallibility of the law of cause and effect. Not expecting to learn immediately or to transform others immediately, but knowing whatever actions we do will have results, virtuous results, positive results eventually if they're motivated out of virtuous motivation.